Hi, everyone. Now, there's a rather strange symbiotic relationship between famous people and the photographers who take their pictures. They both need each other, but are not necessarily wanting the same results. Well, my guest this week knows all about this. He has spent most of his working life literally rubbing shoulders with the rich and famous, often photographing them in their most unguarded moments. With a mixture of politeness, patience, and quiet persistence, he has gained the trust and even the friendship of A-list stars of stage, screen, and music, as well as royalty and political leaders. And now, after 40 years behind the lens, he's almost as well known as many of the people he photographs. He is the celebrity photographer, Richard Young. Richard, welcome to In Conversation.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for giving us your time. Now, the first thing I should say is that in a break with convention, the conversation you're about to watch was pre-recorded a few hours ago. These are tough times for all of us right now, and celebrity photographers are no exception. And Richard has had a last-minute booking to work later on today. So
miracle.
What we would normally be doing our live conversation. So apologies for that, although in a way, I'm happy for you, Richard, because I'm guessing that work has probably been pretty thin on the ground for you since the start of this pandemic we're all living through.
Well, I haven't done a great deal since March. I remember the last party I went to, which was wonderful. It was at the Dorchester, and it was for it was a charity thing for a lot of chefs and everything. Who were cooking wonderful dinners for all these people that were all black tied up, and all the women were looking gorgeous in evening gowns. And I think that was the last thing I did, unless it was also the Brits, which was also a great night. And I was at the Sony party and got some wonderful pictures of my dear friend Harry Styles, who I like a lot. He's a really, really lovely guy. Since then, I haven't done a great deal. To be honest with you, I've been a big fan of Lego, and Lego's coming very useful over the last few months, building those big kits and everything. And also, I did a lovely job with Marco Pierre White, which was wonderful. And then I took the initiative to ring a lot of famous people that I know and been friends with for many years, and asked them if I could very kindly come and take their photograph and do a portrait of them. 18 of 19 people that I got in touch with, not one of them said no, and I still got one or two outstanding to do. So it's been okay. I mean, I was so happy with myself that I took the initiative to kind of take to do this and go around to people's homes and do their portraits. One or two of them came to me, in actual fact, to my house. So yeah, it's been okay. But tomorrow night I got, or tonight, shall I say, I got this party to do, and I'm looking very forward to it. Nice to be asked to do something for a change. People seem to be relaxing a little bit.
Well, that's good. That's good, because I'm in the middle of the country and I have no idea really of how people are behaving. But I'm surprised people are even having parties now. That's great.
Well, I went to one party last week at the Saatchi Gallery. And I said to my wife, there's going to be 150 people in the room in this particular gallery. And it was a gallery of this photographer showing all these lovely photographs he did of David Bowie. And lo and behold, there was 150 people all wearing masks, drinking beer. Well, they had to take the masks off to drink the beer. And in this gallery, and I thought, it works. It works. Everybody seems to be able to trust each other and not talk, into each other's faces without protecting themselves. So I thought that was really nice to see them kind of being able to do this.
And what you would then say to them, can I take your picture and can you take off the mask? Or is that how it works? I mean,
the most important detail of the evening. Whenever I went up to somebody or I wanted to photograph them, they would actually say to me, do you want us to take your mask? Do you want us to take our masks off? And I said, no. Keep them on for one picture and take them for another. Because in years to come, this is going to be a great chronicle and document of what we've been through over the last year, and I think it's important that one sees it in the sense that, you know, people were wearing masks, and then they took them down. So yeah, no, I was happy to do two versions of the same photograph.
Actually, that's a really nice idea. And you know, in preparing for this conversation, I looked back, obviously, through a lot of your the work that you were doing maybe 30 or 40 years ago. And it's true, there is a social documentary side to it. You know, people will, or even now, we look back and see how we, you know, what London was like at the end, you know, in the 80s and 90s. And what you're doing now seems to be just what you just described, a continuation of that.
Well, over the last 48 years, I've been documenting society, film stars, rock stars, artists, fashion designers, whatever, you name it. If they're in that big bubble, which is becoming quite a word now, big bubble that is cut up into many pieces called show business, we've covered all areas of it, and over all these years, and it's been incredible to make the friends I've made, incredible to be asked. And the respect that we are shown when we go places, it's astonishing, and I'm very privileged.
Great. In my introduction, Richard, I described you as a celebrity photographer, but how is that different from a paparazzi photographer?
Well, not a lot. I was a paparazzi photographer without even knowing I was a paparazzi photographer from 1974 to about 1980, not realizing what the hell it meant or what I was doing. All I know was I was just doing what I was doing because there was no other photographer in London doing the same kind of thing. I was out there on my own. So it was an interesting start to a career that I didn't even know I was going to be doing in the first place. It all came by sheer accident. As the old scenario of just being in the right place at the right time, and things took their course. Mm-hmm. And I was very, very fortunate to kind of be become a photographer in the way that I did. But that's the way it is. But the difference between a paparazzi photographer and the photographer that I became is that when you're outside a restaurant or a restaurant or a nightclub or a restaurant or a hotel, and you're standing there for hours, especially the very early years from 73 to I don't know, 79, I guess. It's pretty lonely, you know. You're pretty devoted and pretty much wanting to do what you were doing, because the rewards in those days were far greater than what they are now, financially and everything else. If you get the right picture of the right people, and they fitted the right space in a newspaper, and in those days you had the loyalty of a newspaper because they trusted you and they liked you, and if you went into a newspaper with a certain amount of rolls of film, they processed that film, they made up the prints. And they look at it and go, my God, how did you know about that? How did you know these people were staying there? And how did you know they were at these restaurants? Don't ask me now, because I can't even figure it out for 1 second how I got to know all this information. Mm-hmm. I started working in 1976 with David Bailey's magazine called Ritz Magazine. Now he was a great he was great because he made me like head of the society celebrity social pages of Ritz Magazine. And they obviously knew about certain parties, and there would be more nights I'd be in Mr. Chow's or San Lorenzo than you could ever imagine, because someone was having another birthday party or there was a fashion party or something. And that became a great help, because in those early days from 76 to 83, I was working for Ritz, and everybody kept on seeing your face inside the party. But in my head, I knew I couldn't take as many liberties as you could do if you were on the outside. You're inside. So just kind of be careful, just, play it by ear, and just hopefully you get some great pictures. And of course, me being me, I took a few liberties, of course, even on the inside. And they just made amazing pictures. Ritz Magazine was a great vehicle for me.
What it strikes me is one of the things you've really succeeded at, Richard, is getting your subjects, the famous people you photograph, to trust you and to like you. How difficult is it to maintain that balance between your need to get images that have a market value for a newspaper and a celebrity's desire not to be seen in a compromising or unflattering photo? Because it's quite a tightrope to walk, isn't it?
Well, that comes with things that my father taught me. He said one of the first things he says to me, if there's a door, go through it. They can only turn you around and walk out through the door and tell you to leave. But always be polite. If you'll say please and thank you, which I've taught my children, and they have followed me amazingly well on that one. If you're polite to people and show respect and kindness, it's amazing what can happen. And it's proved itself tenfold over the years, all the time. And even now, at the age of 73, and I'm still doing it. I mean, I won't go chasing too much these days. I let them come in the sense that I won't go chasing the jobs. If they come to me and say to me, Richard, we want you to be there tonight, I'll be there. You know what I mean? So basically, that's it. But the commission jobs are slowly coming in again. I got my gallery. My gallery has been very kind to me over the last few months. We're selling a lot of limited edition prints, a lot of books, and the whole thing has been we could be in a much worse state than we are, and I know that a lot of people are suffering, and my heart goes out to them. And what can I tell you? It's been amazing.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, have there been times when you've held back photos because you knew they would upset someone if they were published?
Oh yeah, over the years we've done that because you got to use your discretion and your common sense, because I'm not in the business to upset people, or maybe not now anyway. But in the early days, I guess we did kind of crack a few eggs and make an omelette, as they say. And make sure those pictures get in the paper, because I was working a lot with people like the Evening Standard back in the real early days, from 73 to about 76. And then I went over to the Daily Express because the picture editor from the Evening Standard was promoted to the Express, and he took me with him. They put me on a retainer, and I serviced the William Hickey column, the gossip column, for nearly 18 years. I still wasn't staff, and I still retained my copyright because I didn't really rely on anybody to tell me where to go and what to do. I found it all out on my own.
Yeah. And I also imagine that not only getting on with the celebrities you were photographing was important, but also getting on with the entourage, the drivers, the security, the minders, the handlers, all those people.
They were the most important people in my life. The security people, who I became very friendly with, as you can imagine, the drivers, the restaurant owners. And another thing, which is very, very important, it's very nice standing outside really nice restaurants like Langland's back in the day, and San Lorenzo and La Familia, and all these wonderful restaurants, which I really adored. But the most important thing was become a customer. Eat. Show them that you respect the food that they're making. Those guys are standing in those kitchens cooking away like crazy, for hours on hours. For probably a lot of people who don't really respect the fact that they are there. But I respected it because I thought, well, those guys are doing pretty much similar to things than I am. So let's be a customer, and pay to be in there. I mean, many times people will say, oh, it's on the house. No, I don't want it on the house. I want to pay for it, and there you go. But I was a good customer of San Lorenzo's, and still am, I guess. And I'm still a customer. No, I'm not a customer anymore of Langland's. With them, they haven't opened since March. But right. I did for lunch, I think in January, with a friend, and we had a really splendid time.
Lovely. And let's just wind the clock back a bit, Richard. You were born in London. You're a London lad. What was your childhood like?
I had a wonderful childhood. I was born in Brocket Hall, which was a very beautiful, stately home. The reason why I was born in Brocket Hall in the Peacock Room in 1947 was because all the hotels, all the hospitals in East London were bombed out, So my mum was shipped out to Welwyn Garden City, and when she was ready to kind of take delivery of me, they shipped all the women over the Brocket Hall, and I got born in the Peacock Room, which is on the first floor to the right from the main entrance. And they held a big celebration for me last year, in actual fact, at Brocket Hall, which I was very, very grateful for. And beautiful dinner they had, and I invited 16 of my favorite friends, and we all stayed there for the night, and we had a great time. So I grew up the morning after being born. I didn't stay very long at Brocket Hall because my dad took me into a car, and with my mum, they discharged her, and I went back to my house, well, my flat where my mum and dad lived in Hackney in Stoke Newington, and I stayed there till about the age of 15. My mum and dad were absolutely wonderful. My dad was the most beautiful man you could ever wish to meet. He was very educated and very lovely, and although he only had a market, he worked off a market stall in Berwick Street Market selling ladies' hosiery. He was a complete gentleman. He was lovely, and my mother was also very lovely too. Not the best cook in the world, I'm afraid, but there you go. I had a great childhood. I got no regrets on my childhood whatsoever.
And then, at what point in your childhood did a camera drop into your hands for the first time? Well,
that's a good question, because my sister, my older sister, had a box brownie, and I remember one day we were all going off to Trafalgar Square to for a day out in Trafalgar Square, and she handed me this camera, and then she said, "Would you take a picture of me and with mum and dad?" And I remember doing it, and I think that was my first and last time I ever touched a camera until many years later.
And do you remember the first serious photo you took? The first photo you had published?
The first. This is very weird, because I tell you what's happened recently. My wife, Susan, has been going through the archives, digitalizing everything, right? And we came across a set of pictures which I did in New York in 1972 when I was living in New York City, and I was working in a recording studio, learning to be a recording engineer, unsuccessfully, may I say, and they gave me the job of taking Stevie Wonder, who was recording in there at the time. He was recording Talking Book, which has become one of the amazing albums of all time, to put him on stage. I think it was in Philadelphia. I can't remember what location it was in America now. And I had to take him down by plane and everything else and put him on stage by his keyboards. But about a week earlier, I bought a camera from a camera store in New York City called Willoughby's. It was a Nikon FTM Platonic head camera with a 35mm lens. I bought that camera and took it with me that day down to Philly, where I had to put Stevie on stage. While I was there, I took some pictures, and we found the film that I took. And one of the pictures shows Stevie without glasses on, which is very, very rare.
I've never seen a picture of him without glasses.
No, as anybody else. This is a picture of Stevie Wonder with no glasses, which is absolutely incredible, and which might surface at some point in my gallery. I don't know when or where or how. And then pictures of the Rolling Stones coming off stage, like Keith Richards coming down some steps. But these pictures are absolutely incredible pictures, and they were the very first pictures I ever took. Well, just took, not professionally or anything else more than for my. And I remember when I got back to New York that same evening, and about 3 or 4 days later, I decided that, I don't like this camera very much, and I took it back to Willoughby's and got a cash refund. I remember taking the film out the back of the camera and making sure I had that, But, interesting pictures. But the first picture I took on a professional level, which I thought maybe I could do something with, and sell to a newspaper, was of a young Paul Getty minus his ear and his girlfriend over Hyde Park.
Yeah, just for anybody who doesn't remember, because I do, but if anybody doesn't remember, Paul Getty was kidnapped in Italy. Am I correct? And in order to extract a ransom, his kidnappers cut off part of his ear and sent it to his father, I think. Am I right? And so how did
that was a $2 million ransom, and I can't remember if they paid it or not. But what was interesting, the picture you showed of Paul with his with Martine,
yeah,
that picture was taken the morning after they got married in Orgia, which is a little village up in the hills of Tuscany. Yeah. And that picture was taken because me and my friend Craig, who was a writer for Rolling Stone magazine, had flown to Pisa and then onto the wedding and everything, which we arrived we arrived too late because the wedding was on the evening when we arrived, but Craig didn't have his details right, and we didn't arrive till the following morning. And that picture was taken at 10 a.m. the following morning, having told the Daily Express we were going to have the world exclusive on their wedding. So we had to get Getty and his wife now up and to make sure that they were dressed and everything, and to recreate the pictures of their wedding day. So here they are walking through the forest from their house down to the village. And we got these pictures, jumped in the car, drove back to Pisa, got on a plane, went back to London, got into the Daily Express building by 3 in the afternoon. And I went up to the picture desk, landed that roll of film on the desk and said, here are world exclusive pictures. And the picture editor said, but we saw the pictures on PA. I said, no. There was just the rehearsals. This is the real thing. And they went for it.
What's amazing is that you managed to get Getty to do it. I mean, he'd just come out of a pretty traumatic situation. I'm surprised he was even up for it.
Well, we were quite good friends with him by this time. And not only did I do those wedding pictures of him walking through the forest with Martine, they also asked me to go on honeymoon with them. And I went to Innsbruck and did the honeymoon pictures. I've never been on a honeymoon before. I've done a lot of weddings and lots of other parties, but not a honeymoon.
So back in the early days when you were building your career, just tell us what was a typical day like, or more likely a typical evening and night out on the wet and windy streets of London?
Well, it works backwards from the night before. So if whatever I've done the night before and I've left over at the day, say for argument's sake, the Daily Express, I will go back to the Daily Express at 9 o'clock in the morning and making sure that they process the film, unless I've done it myself. And then I will help the picture editor to choose whatever pictures from the contact sheets and help tell him the story about which pictures are the strongest ones, and print it up. And I will stay there most of the day, making sure that my picture goes in the paper, right? So I had to use them a bit. So I used to go up to this cake shop on Fleet Street and buy cakes and coffee for the whole picture desk. I used to do about 4 days a week, and it kind of schmoozed them a bit into using my pictures. So it was quite funny, really, in a sense. They understood that I was very devoted and very, very, very much wanting to see my pictures in the paper. And you know, and because I was working with the Hickey column and everything, if they weren't going to fit in the main paper itself, then they would go around to the diary and go into the Hickey page.
But the evening previous to that, you would. Do you have a plan, and would you just sort of follow your nose, or?
It depends. Sometimes you knew about an art gallery opening. Sometimes you knew about a shop opening. Sometimes you knew about an event that might be going on. And you will go to whatever it was. You will go to it. If it meant standing outside, then that's the case. But that didn't stop there. Then you'll go on to another thing, maybe a restaurant, because most nights I always checked out. I always checked out what was happening at San Lorenzo or Langham's or Harry's Bar, or sit outside Annabelle's, the old Annabelle's, and wait for whoever may be in there. And it's amazing because we used to make friends. We made friends with all these people that were so affiliated with all these places. They didn't mind giving you information. Because, you know, what's it mean? You know, what's it matter to them? You know, they all knew they could trust you, and that was the main part of it. You're not going to do anything silly. All you want to do is take a photograph. I mean, you know, So sometimes it was worthwhile hanging around because the information you were being fed by these wonderful people was interesting. You know, if they told me Jack Nicholson was in there, or Dustin Hoffman, or Elizabeth Taylor was sitting in a restaurant, not only would you know it through them, but you would know it by the security or by the cars that would be parked outside. You get to know all this kind of information. And then that's how the paparazzi today probably work, but they work very differently today. They work on scooters and they work from distances with long lenses, where they never worked with a long lens. The longest lens I ever had was a 35mm. I was right in your face. And the cameras that we used were Leicas, you know, Leica M4s, film cameras. And then we went into using Nikon's a great deal. But the two brands I used most of the time for any of this stuff was Leica or Nikon.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you used to get around on a motorbike a lot. Was that? I mean, you have a bit of a passion for Harley Davidsons, is that right?
Yeah. I have a big passion for Harley Davidson.
Big.
That was my first bike, by the way. That's my first bike. That was my Sportster that I bought the day after I passed my tests. And I rang up this guy who was advertising it in Motorcycle News, and he asked for £800 for that bike.
Wow.
And it's only when I got it and kind of rode it for a few days, I realized why it was only £800. Because I remember driving it all the way out to, what's it called? Out to Windsor to the Polo, and I had the petrol lock on it, and it kept on stalling. I couldn't quite figure out. Then someone said, "Have you turned the petrol on?" And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Well, that little knob on the side." And then I learned how to do that. And then when I got to Polo, I put it on the side stand. Because I put it on some soft grass, the whole thing collapsed and fit on its side.
Yes.
So that was my first experiences of Harley Davidson, and I still love Harley Davidson, and I wish I could had one right now. But still, there you go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a picture will always have more value if you're the only one to take it, and this was very much the case with Richard Burton's 50th birthday party. So how did you manage to get into that?
Well, I was at I was still doing my 9-to-5 job in the Village Bookshop in Regent Street, which was owned by a lovely man called Jeffrey Quintner. And round about when I was still having my early relationship with the Evening Standard before I kind of upgraded to the Daily Express, the picture editor rang me round about 5 o'clock, as he would do maybe 2 or 3 times a week, to send me places. And so it was an October night, 1974, and it was like it is the day out here in London, pretty miserable, raining, cold, and whatever. And he rang me and said to me, "Will I go to the Dorchester tonight? You're not going to be able to see anything, but go into the lobby, you know, and see if Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton come out and do a photo call," which is pretty unlikely, which was unlikely, and it didn't happen. But the PR woman came out with her young assistant, and you know, they said, "Would you gentlemen mind leaving?" And mind you, we must remember, in those days there was only 3 or 4 of us standing in the lobby. Could you imagine what it'd be like today? First of all, I don't think you'd even be allowed into the lobby. There was only like 3 or 4 of us there.
Yeah.
These were quite elderly gentlemen, photographers who were staff photographers, and all they wanted to do was go home. And I followed the young assistant, PR girl, and she was going through some glass doors, and I followed her. And eventually I got into this, I was told to go through some door. And as I walked in, and there it was, all decorated in gold and silver and everything. And on the mirror it said, "Happy birthday, Richard." And I knew they weren't saying it for me. So, and the other person in the room, which was empty, and the room was made up for about 60 other people, which I would imagine were all Richard Burton's Welsh family coming up from Wales to celebrate the 50th birthday. And the only other person in the room was the DJ called Peter, and setting up his turntables. And I went over to him and got friendly with him, and I put my camera down by the side, and very stupidly I left my flash on. Anyway, he taught me how to use the turntable. I'm now the assistant DJ.
Right.
By which time, Liz Taylor, Richard Burton have come in, they've sat down, they're eating dinner, but I still haven't taken a photograph yet. And, you know, everybody gets up and they're clapping, and and suddenly this big trolley comes in, and there's a big cake, and there's 50 candles around it. And Richard Burton comes to the center of the room with Elizabeth Taylor. They blow out the candles. Then they got into a big kissing thing, a big hug and everything. And then Elizabeth Taylor went on the dance floor and started dancing. And at which point I thought, well, you know, by that time I knew I had about 5 or 10 frames, which were reasonably okay. And then by that time I thought, okay, let's just push our luck just that little bit further. And I went on to near the dance floor and photographed her dancing. And she came over to me and she said to me, her nose touched my nose. She said, I don't know who you are. Like, get out of here now.
Whoa. And you did.
And those pictures went global. They went in the front page of the Daily Express, and the Daily Express gave them to other papers, and the syndication sold them all around the world. And it was the biggest thing that, you know, I've ever experienced in all my photographic career. I mean, that was big, big news, because they've just come back from Africa. They just got married for the 2nd time, and there you go. That's the deal. And those pictures went global.
Well done you for getting it. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you don't try, you know, what was it your father said? Go through the door. You know?
My father always says to me, go through the door. They can only say turn your back. I can say turn around. Just don't be rude or you know, or aggressive or anything. You know, just turn around and walk. You know what I mean? What can you do?
Yeah. Well, another big break you had was, and it's very touching, I've seen you talking about in interviews, was meeting Freddie Mercury, which then led on to you becoming the official photographer of the band Queen, and in fact so much so that you were almost treated as a member of the band. So tell us about meeting Freddie Mercury, because he meant quite a lot to me too, and although I never met him. How did you first bump into him?
I first bumped into Freddie New Year's Eve 1978. I was actually on my way to a Rod Stewart concert at the Lyceum, which was cancelled because they said he had a throat infection. So I went to Monkbridge nightclub in Jermyn Street instead. And I walked in there, and I was the only person there. And as the evening progressed, and it's about 11 o'clock now, suddenly Britt Ekland turned up, Ronnie Woods, Keith Richards, Rod Stewart, and I said to him, why didn't you do your concert tonight? He goes, oh, I feel much better now. Okay, fair enough. And I told him the story. I told him I went to the Lyceum, and he apologized to me. He said, I'm sorry. And then Freddie turned up with his whole entourage and everything, and everybody was mingling. There was no such thing as the VIP area. There's no such thing as red ropes, this one over there, you can be over, no segregation, nothing like that whatsoever. Everybody was together the way it should be. Everybody should be together in a club. None of this VIP area business, whatever that may mean. I don't understand it anyway, and I still don't after 48 years. So in actual fact, that was my first meeting. And a month or so later, I get a phone call from his publicist and said, would I go and do a photo shoot at Wimbledon Stadium when they were doing they weren't, the band weren't there, but 100 naked girls were, and they're all riding bicycles. I think the songs Bare Naked Ladies or something, Bare Bottom Ladies or something like that. I don't remember. Anyway, I photographed these 100 ladies driving around the circuit of Wimbledon Stadium. I didn't even realize they were going to be naked. No one told me that. All I was told was you're going to be photographing a lot of people on bicycles. Anyway, but as time progressed, I guess I'm getting phone calls from the same publicist and saying to me, would I like to go and take pictures of Freddie, making a video at Pinewood or Shepperton, wherever it was. And it was incredible.
Yeah.
And my friendship with him became bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we went on the road, and I went and did a European tour with him. And then one day I got a phone call from Freddie. By the way, we all had nicknames. Mine was Muriel.
Muriel, right.
Muriel Young. I don't know if our listeners and viewers know who Muriel Young was. She was in the 50s or early 60s. She was a compere on children's TV with a little puppet called Muffin the Mule.
Oh, right.
Her name was real young. So Freddie named me Muriel. So Freddie calls me one day. It's 1985. It's his birthday. He's gonna hold a party, and he said to me, "When I come to it, it's in Munich, and it's going to be a drag ball." I said, "No problem, Freddie." He said, "Everybody coming in drag." I said, "Fine." He said, "Everybody,"
including you.
including me. And here I am in my wig and my dress and my shoes and everything. And we had a big problem on the night dressed up like that, as you can imagine, because it was the first time in my life that I experienced having hair coming down the side of my face and everything. And on the night, I used two Leica film cameras, analog M4s, and shooting the film with film. The hair is getting caught up on the tape spool of the camera, so the wig is going more and more and more that way, right? To the fact that it was getting lopsided on me whatsoever. So every half an hour or so, I had to sit down and cut the hair out of the take-up spool on the light.
I mean, getting dragged into the camera.
Yeah, I was nearly in the camera. I went into the roll of film.
Yeah, well, but you went with the band to do a massive concert in Rio, and I think what was interesting, from a photographic point of view, was that you were shooting, or they asked you, or you had the idea of shooting from the back of the stage, looking out, which is not the obvious way to do it. But how did that come about?
Well, that initially didn't necessarily come from them. It's just something I quite enjoyed, the fact that I just thought that if I can see 100,000 people along with Freddie Mercury at the center of stage, that's going to be a very interesting picture. So I took this, and I still do it today. I will make sure that I'm always on stage at some point, making sure I get the audience as well, because the audience is the biggest part of the whole gig.
Yeah.
To be there to see the artist, right? The artist is there to entertain 100,000 people and sing along with their songs that they know so well. And what's very important was with Freddie, I said to him, "I'm going to do this." And he said, "That is fantastic." He said, "Do you need any help?" I said, "Well, no, leave it with me. I will talk to the lighting guys." And I always say to them, if they see me wandering around on stage discreetly, make sure you're wearing black, that they put the house lights up. So by that way, I'll be able to pick up what I can of the audience. Of course, if it was a daytime concert, it worked beautiful, like it did at Slane Castle in Ireland. I mean, you could see 100,000 people all singing Radio Gaga, which was amazing. I'm on one cliff and Fred is on the other. He's orchestrating the whole 100,000 people, and it was just amazing. And I adapted that kind of idea for many, many concerts I've done, or many things I've done, making sure that you get the audience. It's very, very important.
I remember well the shock and the sadness when Freddie died, and you must have felt the same. Although I imagine you knew, for most of us, that it was coming.
Well, I did a lot of videos. I did a lot of the stills on videos, and I saw it firsthand, and over the years, especially those years, because there was nothing around to kind of help anybody that had HIV, unlike today. I mean, if the same drugs were around today, for then, Freddie will still be with us, God bless him.
Yeah.
And I loved him very much. I loved the band very much. It's not just Freddie, it's also the others and the rest of the band, Brian, John, and
oh my God, it's gone out of my head too.
And everybody, it's as a unit, they were one of the most amazing, group of people to work with. Working in Rio with them was very, very special. And I'll tell you one thing that I enjoyed so much about, and which earned my respect for them completely, was that you be in your hotel room about 8 o'clock at night, and you think, okay, this is all the room service, everybody's gone. I always get a phone call from the road manager or somebody, or the tour manager, and they say, "Listen, we're down in the lobby. We're all going for dinner. Be down here in 10 minutes."
Wow.
And then, you were part of the gig, man. You'd be there. You're there with them, and it's fantastic. be respected like that. And it was very jolly. But don't bring a camera, by the way.
I just know, yeah, don't bring the camera. But no, I'm just jealous that you had that experience. And I mean, it's kind of amazing the way the Queen have managed to keep going, because you'd think with with an individual as charismatic as Freddie Mercury, that once he wasn't part of the mix anymore, that it couldn't continue. And yet they really
they are continuing.
Yeah,
and they're doing great. And their new album just came out, which is a double album of live stuff they've done on a world tour, and I played it the other night at home, and it's fantastic. And I'm hoping that when they recommence on a world tour next in 2021 or whenever, late 2021, I can go with them. I like to go. I like to finish my rock and roll concert days photographing Queen again. It would be very, very special to me, and hopefully they will feel the same way. But I would love to go back on the road with them again.
Yeah. But it wasn't just musicians and actors that you were photographing at that time. I was surprised to read somewhere that you photographed Fidel Castro in Cuba. Well, I mean, it must be a little outside of your comfort zone, wasn't it?
I was asked by Franco, and oh God, I'm having a senior moment here. Hunter and Franco are one of the biggest importers of cigars in the UK, and they asked me would I come and photograph the week in Cuba, in Havana, and it's a special cigar week. They have the first week in March. And they asked me, would I like to come and spend a week with the whole English contingency? Everything is being taken care of, and we're going to have, parties every night, and they're going to be, sampling beautiful whiskies and rums and whatever else is going on, and cigars. Now, I'm a big cigar fan, right? I mean, I've had any great cigars recently because they're very expensive, and the ones I like, and the Monte Cristo number 2, if anybody's listening and they want to contribute to my fund, Monte Cristo's number 2s are my favorite cigars. And anyway, so I went there and I spent the week photographing all the various parties and things that were happening. And on the last night, which was a Saturday night, we all got invited down to the local Museum of Modern Art down in downtown Havana, in all of Havana, and 500 distributors and dealers from all over Europe were all there. And I'm sitting on the English contingency table, and there's about 10 of us, and the table next to me was empty. And I said to the gentleman who was the managing director, I said, who sits there? He said, oh, that's Fidel Castro's table. And there's likelihood that he may not. So, so about an hour into the dinner, I could hear all this commotion going on, and there's Fidel Castro. He's walking up the stairs with all his bodyguards, and he seats at the table, and they're all sitting around him. And me, being cheeky as I am, and still am, and will continue to be, I walked over to the table and just went click, click, click. And his main security guy said, no, rushing me away. Anyway, I must have done it 6 or 7 times, right? Went over to the table, kept on taking pictures, right? And they brushing me away. So the last time I went over, he says to me, do me a favor, just get on with it. Do what you got to do. Let's
get out. Yeah.
So once the dinner is finished, Fidel Castro is now up. He's talking to people. All these young ladies came around and stood around him. We got these nice pictures. I never seen him with young ladies around him before, right? Oh. And you must remember that Fidel Castro didn't have a suit or anything like a proper suit. He had a fatigues on, green jacket and green trousers, right? Mm. So back in the late 60s, Yves Saint Laurent made these khaki suits, which was like a safari jacket with matching trousers for men and women.
Yeah.
I went up to him and I said, hello, blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, and I touched his sleeve of his jacket. I go, Saint Laurent? He said, and he's looking at me like, huh? I thought, you better put off, because you may not get out of this one.
Good luck.
And I was lack of English and a sense of humour didn't kind of get through too well then. But anyway, all I wanted to know was his suit made by Yves Saint Laurent, but it wasn't.
But I'm curious to know, was he? Because you must have had an image of what he would be like before you actually were in the same room as. Did he live up to his? Was he charismatic? Did he come across as charismatic?
Well, I don't know. He seemed very quiet and, and everything. And it was the last time that he ever went to one of these cigar things. He went to them for years on end. But about a year later, he had a fall and he became quite ill. And so the one I went to and the one where he was the last time he ever went to one of those cigars dinners to meet all the people from around the globe. And I treat everybody the same. It doesn't matter who they are. It could be the president of the USA. It could be Fidel Castro. It could be anybody. To me, hey, how you doing? What's going on? What's happening? You know what I mean? And no airs and graces at all. No one gets treated because we are all the same.
Well, I think that, and I think actually, famous people probably rather like that in a way. They probably get tired of people, bowing and scraping around them. So I get that. Another interesting assignment you had after Castro was you went to Romania with Michael Jackson, and I think this was just after was this quite soon after the fall of Ceausescu?
It was very soon after it. 1992, and I got a phone call from Michael Jackson's charity Heal the World. And they said, would you like to travel with Michael to Romania because he's going to meet, he's going to go to these orphanages and everything. He was on a tour, by the way. He did concerts in Romania. I didn't get involved in that side of it. I got involved in a much more sensitive side of it. So we get to Romania and we're in Bucharest. And I remember the first night there was a dinner and everything, and that was very pleasant. And the next morning, I get told by his people that be ready to move early. We're going to go to one of the orphanages. We're going to do one that morning and then another one the following morning. And then on the third day, we're going to be going to a hospital where the American surgeons are going to be doing cataract operations on these young children. Anyway, on the first morning, we're in the grounds of this orphanage, which was in downtown Bucharest. And it was just astonishing how many people were in the grounds. You had all Michael's security and his publicists and people. I mean, it was over 100 people just milling around. Plus, then you had the fans. Then you had these kids who had nothing to do with the orphanage whatsoever. Yeah. And then this woman comes out, the matron.
Yeah.
Big woman, very, very strong.
Yeah.
She looks at everybody and she says, okay, nobody comes in except him and him, pointing at me, Michael. And I went, God. I went, okay, So Michael and I traipsed in there, right? And we're with some nurses. And we're going into the first room, and suddenly it hits you like a bombshell. The stench of urine and everything else, and you see the conditions that these children, these babies are in, which is pretty grim. All the cots are rusty and haven't been, the sheetings and everything else haven't been changed in I don't know how long. And it was one of the most saddest things I ever done in my whole life. Michael and I are wandering around, and I said to Michael and I were in there for 3 hours, and we got to know each other pretty well in a sense because we were having all these conversations about various things. And I said to Michael, why don't you pick up a baby and put the baby in your arm? He said, oh, yeah, that'd be a great thing. That'd be lovely. And what was lovely, Michael didn't have this funny squeaky voice or anything that he made out to have or anything. He was normal. He was lovely. He was very sensitive to the whole thing. And he's cracking one of the babies. And I said, hey, why don't you have one in the other arm? It's going to make a great picture. And he did, and with this great smile and everything. And behind the picture that you're seeing him holding these two kids, he's crying. I mean, he was crying his eyes out. And once he started up, I started up, and we both got very emotional about it. And we were in there for 3 hours, and we both came out, and he couldn't talk to any of his entourage. You know, he just wanted to be left alone in a corner somewhere, just to kind of calm down, because it was very, very sad. And the same thing happened the following morning in another part of town somewhere, equally distressing and sad as it was. And it was very, very, very heartwarming, I tell you. I mean, heartwarming. What I'm talking about, very sad and the whole thing. I was really affected by it, and thinking, how can you treat children like this? You know, it's one of the saddest things I've ever seen. And then next day, we're in this hospital with these American surgeons who were flown in from Denver, Colorado, and they're doing the cataracts operations. And that was very sad to watch too.
I remember seeing at that time seeing photos of those, exactly what you're talking about, and yeah, it was just unbelievable how I mean, they were just, it really was beyond shocking, wasn't it? So just tell me how, Richard, how much in the work that you do, how much editorial, or maybe it never happens, but how much editorial control do some of these celebrities demand? I mean, is it common that people will say to you, well, I want to see the pictures first and decide what, you know?
It happens sometimes. I'm very against it. You know, why have me there if you don't trust me? If you don't trust me, why have me in there as a house photographer or something? If you want picture approval. I mean, you know, what are you 18, 19-year-old people looking at to kind of be? Are you picture editors? Have the newspapers? I mean, you know, do you know about this stuff? You know, I find that very odd. But anyway, you know, but as the years have gone on, I kind of just let them do what they got to do. You know what I mean? I mean, it doesn't matter. We're not broke. Listen, we're not saving lives here. We're not doctors and nurses. All we're doing is taking pictures of famous people having a good time. I mean, if they're looking for a certain picture, if they feel that a particular picture might be offensive or whatever it may be, then that's entirely up to them. But you know, I just do what I have to do, and that's cool.
No, you got a great attitude. I read somewhere that you have an archive, and this is, you know, really threw me back, an archive of over 2 million, and this is just negatives. Negatives. I mean, what does 2 million negatives look like? You know,
my poor wife has for the last 20 years or more been plowing through this back catalogue of pictures, and I don't think she's even halfway yet. And
she's still your wife.
Yeah, she's still my wife.
Yeah.
I can hear rumblings downstairs of the contrary. There you go. But yeah, for the last 20 years, she's been going through it and digitalizing as much as we can. But there is such a mountain of material. And what surprises everybody is that I can remember most of the pictures that I took. You know, when I see a picture somewhere, I know that's mine. I don't know how. I mean, maybe, I don't know.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't know why it is. Is it maybe some small neuron in the brain has kept that piece of information and it's feeding back to you? I don't know. I know that I've had the same experience with my own pictures. Yeah. I know there'll be people watching, Richard, who are interested in cameras and the technical side of things. I mean, you mentioned you use Leicas and Nikons. Is that right?
Well, now we use. I still only use Leicas and Nikons. I haven't kind of upgraded myself on the Nikon front because now they've got a D6 out. I'm still hanging in there with my D4s, which are just as good as anything else that I'm using. As for the Leicas, I'm still using my Qs. Leica Q, which came out a few years ago, which are really lovely little cameras. They've got fixed lenses on them, but you can take it from a 28 to up to a 50. You go through the range of 28, 35, and 50. The Leica, I love Leica. I've always loved Leica, and one day I hope that Leica, because of all the publicity I've given them and then all the mentions I've given them, they will give me a nice M10P, please. So we'll see how we go.
I thought it was kind of amazing that when Leica brought out that that particular mod, the digital black and white.
Oh, I love it. The monochrome. It's a beautiful camera.
It takes the most gorgeous files. It's really absolutely beautiful. Yeah, yeah. But
choice, actually, when I do actually get around to hopefully having a Leica again, you know, with a nice 28mm lens. Am I dropping a hint? And I wouldn't mind it being a monochrome.
Yeah. Well, we'll pass that on to the Leica.
Pass it on to them.
You know, I said earlier on that this wasn't a live recording, but we did get some questions came in on social media beforehand. Can I ask you just a couple of questions that people have sent in?
Yeah.
There's someone here from Ibrahim in Pacifica, which I'm guessing is somewhere in the States. Which decade from your book Nightclubbing was your favorite?
That's very, very easy.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, nothing is ever going to replace the 70s and 80s.
No.
You know, I'm going to say both those, because the 70s and 80s really created who I became as a photographer. They were special, special years. They were. It will never happen again. What happened in the 70s and the 80s, you know, is something that will, you know, will go on for, you know, which will be an everlasting chronicle of a period of social gathering of photographs that would never ever be happening again. I mean, and the people we met in that period, it's astonishing. You know, could be anybody from Freddie Mercury to Marvin Gaye, could be to Michael Jackson. I mean, you know, George Harrison. I mean, God almighty, my friendship with George Harrison was incredible.
Yeah. I know a lot of that's just not possible these days. No.
Sadly, most of the people I mention these days, I know this sounds really very dramatic, is that sadly they're no longer with us.
Yeah.
And you know, and because of the great volume of wonderful, wonderful people that I had the privilege and good luck of photographing, I ran out of people to photograph.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Not quite sure what I'm left with.
Well, I've got a question here from Natalie in University Park. Says, how do you keep up with modern day celebrities and who is who? Do you think reality TV stars are today's celebrities? Yeah, how do you keep up with who's famous these days?
They're celebrities, but they're not stars.
Ah, nicely put. Yeah. It's almost the title of a book, isn't it? That's great. Yeah.
Stars are the main thing. Celebrity is something else. Like Andy Warhol, you said that, you know, you'll be famous for 15 minutes. Now it's only 5 seconds.
Yeah, and that's on YouTube. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
King a guy called King in Florida somewhere says, when you are attending parties, you'll like this question, when you're attending parties, do you put your camera down at a certain point in the evening, or do you just keep shooting?
Very good question. I've always wanted to answer this one. I put the camera down at a certain period of the evening when people have suddenly become too, they've been drinking too much or whatever they may have been doing. You suddenly know there's a certain period of the evening, a little red light comes on in my head and go, that's it. That's the end of it. And I'm happy when that happens because that means I can go home.
Right. Yeah. We got a question here from Erica in Warrington. Says, we all love to hear about wild rock and roll antics. What is the wildest party you've ever been to in your capacity as a photographer?
Freddie Mercury's 39th birthday party in Munich at Mrs. Henderson's, where everybody was dressed up in drag. And that was pretty bizarre. I mean, that's gone down in history as being one of the most bizarre parties. But not just that one. There was the one that Queen had some great parties, or Freddie had some great birthday parties in Ibiza at Pikes, which were equally as outrageous than the ones that equally as outrageous as the one at Mrs. Henderson's in Munich.
It had to be Freddie Mercury, didn't it?
Well, yeah. There was a fire once. I remember the fire. And they started dousing the fire along the wall with all these lovely plants with vodka.
Just what you need in a fire,
yeah. Put the fire out with vodka. It's all right. It's okay. We can drink it off the wall later.
But Richard, do you think, I mean, if somebody, young to, I mean, I'm sure people ask you this, young kids and stuff. I mean, from the outside, what you do, because I know that from the inside that what you do is a lot of hard work, but from the outside, it has this veneer of the glamour, and you're up close with famous people and stuff. I mean, I don't think someone could have a career like you've had today.
Well, I don't think they would have it now. You must remember that the first 30, 40 years of doing it was there was, I didn't have any home life really. I'm always out every night. I didn't see my children growing up. I was so possessed with what I was doing. It was so important to me, and it still is up to a point. And the rewards now, I reap the awards by having my own gallery, which not many of photographers can say they have their own gallery, showing off their own work in limited editions. So I've been very privileged in the years of standing outside nightclubs, restaurants, hotels, gathering all these pictures together of a collection of society and everything else that you could call it, which chronicles the last 48 years of the work, of not just London. Some of it was done in Los Angeles, New York, and Paris. I mean, they were wonderful trips when you got invited by private plane to Paris to do a party in the Place Vendôme for Cartier with Catherine Deneuve and Alain Delon and all these kind of people, right? Or going to Los Angeles for Vanity Fair and doing 10 years of Vanity Fair Oscar night parties of all the AA list of wonderful people. But the one question someone asked me once, not so long ago, who have I ever been starstruck?
Good question.
And
yeah.
have I ever been starstruck? And the answer to that is no, not really. And except for this one particular picture that I'm going to tell you about. It was a Vanity Fair party in Los Angeles. And I've been a fan of this woman for many, many years. Sadly, she's not in great health at the moment, but she's fighting back, please God. And she's standing there with a cigarette in one hand, a glass in the other hand, kind of cool. And I went over to her and I said to her, whatever you do, don't change the pose. Stay as you are. And she looked at me, she said, well, just get on with it then. And I took her picture, and she was very graceful, and she was lovely, and I had a nice chat to her, and it was Joni Mitchell.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Okay. No, it's so interesting, because I was just half an hour ago reading an article in today's, I think it's The Guardian. Yeah, because she's got she sort of remastered a number of her songs, I think, or anyway, she's got an album out.
Well, that's putting 50 years on copyright.
Joni Mitchell, huh? Yeah, fantastic. Gosh, it's good to hear she's still going well.
I'm happy too. I love her music. She's one of my favorites, along with people like Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, and Bruce Springsteen. They're all the kind of guys I like listening to. Springsteen's new album is brilliant. Yeah, it's great.
Wonderful. You mentioned you have 3 kids. Are any of them photographers or?
Well, my daughter is a photographer, and she was doing great until lockdown came. But she's still doing her thing, and she's still very creative and she has a great, technically she's better than I am. She knows more about a camera and how it works, and is much more, she's much more into it than well, she's not more into it, but she's very good at being a photographer. She's a great photographer in actual fact, and she looks good. When she goes to the jobs that she was going to, she always dresses beautifully. She always looks great, and she's very polite and very lovely. She's one of the nicest girl photographers I've seen around for a long time. And I'm not saying that just because she's my daughter, but her presence, makes you feel comfortable with her around. Yeah. One of my sons is a famous DJ, Sam Young, DJ Sam.
Oh, really?
And he's been a DJ for 30 years, maybe. Not 30. She is 30. He's been a DJ for about 25 years, and he's brilliant. He does all the biggest functions you can imagine. He did George Clooney's wedding for him. So yeah, he's a great DJ.
So I just imagining if a sort of a modern day Richard Burton had a 50th birthday party, you could be it would be a family young affair, wouldn't it? It'd be
Well,
your
you
son.
do family young. We got my wife, who's a jewelry designer, so you can have the jewelry made by her.
Wonderful.
Photographs taken by me, and now my daughter's doing this food podcast thing. You can have the food by her. So all in all, it's you have a joint, you have the whole collection. Oh, and don't forget Sam; he can do the music as well.
There you go. Perfect. You mentioned your gallery. I mean, unusually for a photographer, you have it's a West End. You're in the West End of London. You have a gallery, which I guess is one way of making sure you always have an exhibition. But you also had the novel idea of doing walk-in portraits. Just tell us how does that, and are you doing those now? And how does it?
Yeah, we're still doing them, and that has worked out very well. And we have a studio downstairs in the gallery, and we've just enlarged it. And what we've done in the past is that people come in, famous people, or there's people who want to have their photograph taken with their families, and we put them on. We have a backdrop and everything, and big lights like I got up now, and we take their portrait. And it's been a very interesting thing to do. I love it.
Yes.
But we do it on large format camera. Sorry, I meant to tell you. We do it on a large format kind of Mamiya RZ67 camera for those interested to know what camera I use. 2.25. It's on black and white negative film, and it's great. I really enjoy doing that.
I just took in her questions here whilst you're talking, Richard. The one from Rebecca in Plantsville, USA, says, "What's the best photograph you never got to take, and what happened?" Because don't you find we remember the ones we didn't get?
The ones that got away.
Yeah. Is there one?
There is one picture. There is one situation. I was in Los Angeles and doing something. I was sent to Los Angeles to do some job. It wasn't that really important. But I was out shopping one day, and I ran into this lovely lady who I knew from London, and she was now living in LA. And Sammy Davis Jr. had just passed away, and they were holding a wake that night at Sammy Davis's wife's house.
Yeah.
And well, I should have gone. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Mr. Sinatra, I think, turned up or was singing a few songs, and I didn't go. So that would have been a great situation, photographing him in someone's living room.
That would have been amazing. Yeah. Is there anyone you haven't photographed but would like to?
I'd like to have photographed John Lennon. He moved to America long before I picked up a camera. He moved to New York in 1970. Never came back to London, really. By the time 1973 came around, he was ensconced in New York. And all the times I would go to New York for whatever jobs I was doing there, I never ran into him, and he never came to the same parties I went to, which tells you what kind of parties I went to, which obviously wasn't that interesting. They didn't invite John Lennon, but there you go, not to worry.
Richard, it's been lovely talking with you. Are you in your gallery right now? Is that the gallery you can see behind you?
I've got all these Freddie Mercury pictures.
And they're all for sale?
My shoulder here, it shows him on stage at Live Aid.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney and various other people, and Bob Geldof's there in the corner somewhere. And is an example of the picture I was telling you about of being on stage. As you can see, I'm standing on a riser by Roger's drums, and kind of crowd, and Freddie's right there. Where's Freddie? Right in the middle, and in the center of stage. So that's an example of getting the picture of all the audience.
That's a wonderful shot. Yeah. And all of those are all for sale in the gallery.
They're all for sale in the gallery. Yeah.
Good. Well, if anyone's in London, go and check out Richard's gallery. Get your portrait taken at the same time.
Thank you very much,
Richard. It's been lovely. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and I wish you, well, I don't hardly need to wish you good luck on a job. You could do it literally with your eyes closed, but I'm glad to hear you're working anyway. That's great. And thanks for doing this.
Alastair, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure doing this for you guys. I really enjoyed it. And I told you a lot of things I haven't spoken about before, which is quite nice, actually, quite refreshing. So wonderful.
Thank you. All the best.
You too. Take care.
That's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed getting the lowdown on the high life with Richard. And so from myself and the rest of the hardworking behind the scenes Viking TV team, until next week, thank you for watching and goodbye.